Every beginning signals a brand new end. All is a cycle, endlessly repeating, flowing through the river of souls. Fate is not a yoke around your neck or a chain around your wrists, it is the bend in the river ahead. You may fight it, you may ride it, the river still bends. To serve the Lady of Graves is to watch this river and guide the souls in it through this flow. Now, come, initiates, walk with me. For while this is not the beginning, it is a beginning. Your training awaits. Mother Almeria, head priestess of Pharasma, welcoming new clerics to a temple in Ustalav. Greetings, Pathfinders, and welcome back to the Absalom Archives. This video will be embracing the spooky season theme, because that's never dated a topic or made its release extremely ironic if it comes out late, which this is definitely going to, ah-ha-ha-ha-ha! But, you know, a video is never actually late or early, but arrives at exactly the fated time it is meant to. At least, that's what I tell myself at 3 AM sometimes. But enough rambling, we have a goddess to discuss, as we begin a deific deep dive into Pharasma, the Lady of Graves, goddess of birth, death, fate, prophecy, and time. Domains: death, fate, healing, knowledge, soul, time, vigil. Historical domains: repose, water. Historical subdomains: ancestors, flowing, ice, memory, psychopomps, resurrection, thought. Favored weapon: the dagger. Favored animal: the whippoorwill. Edicts: strive to understand ancient prophecies, destroy the undead, lay bodies to rest. Anathema: create undead, desecrate a corpse, take from the dead in bad faith. History and mythology. Pharasma, the Lady of Graves, is the oldest being there is. I did not say that she is the oldest thing in the universe, because that would be potentially incorrect. For you see, Pharasma might be older than the universe. We have two sources on this information, one terrestrial and one quite cosmic. The Windsong Testament is a series of parables written and disseminated by the Windsong Abbey, an interfaith refuge located in Varesia. The accuracy of the Windsong Testament is not necessarily questionable, as the stories don't claim absolute accuracy. They are parables, stories meant to illustrate a point. They contain a truth, not absolute truth. So while they make for a good starting point for our research, the information needs additional verification. And that brings us to our second source, the Concordance of Rivals. The Concordance of Rivals is a legendary tome penned by perhaps the most famous angel of the Heaven's Gates, and yes, I am including Sarenrae when I make that claim. Tabris, aka the Chronicler, is a character worthy of his own video down the line, but the quick and dirty is he dedicated his existence to chronicling the truths and actions of the various planes. After writing on the upper and lower planes, he concluded his work by documenting the remaining neutral planes. And that brings us back around to Pharasma, because in Concordance of Rivals, we have the closest we'll likely ever get to an origin for the universe. I believe this comes from a chapter of Concordance of Rivals called When Dusk Met Dawn. It speaks of a time before the universe existed, in a vast expanse of quintessence. All was scattered potential and thought, except for a single place, a single survivor of the universe that was before. She sat upon a seal, the final remnants of that world, a font of power, coveted by horrifying things from outside basically all of reality, those who remain. And note, they don't count as being older than Pharasma. Stuff outside all known existence where time never touches is obviously exempt from this. Anyway, I guess that kind of spoils who this survivor is, doesn't it? Yeah, it's Pharasma. She needed to protect this seal, and so she used the abundant quintessence to protect it, forming a great shell around it. And that shell was me. Nah, I'm kidding, it's the universe. A full accounting of what happened next would take its own video, but the end result was that souls formed free will, the outer planes came into being, and the River of Souls was formed. This begins the constant cycle of life, death, afterlife, and renewal that fuels the outer planes to this day. While this process was created by Pharasma, in air quotes, it is only moderately maintained by her. The nature of the outer planes means that strong enough forces or ideas will just sort of calcify into proper patterns. That's how outsiders like angels, aeons, clipoths, and proteans were first formed, and how the River of Souls self-perpetuates. Based on what I've read, Pharasma didn't even fully design the system. She shaped the quintessence of the Outer Planes with a specific intent, to protect the energy that maintains the shell that is reality. That energy was used by the earliest gods to create life and had shifted over time with the introduction of free will to become mortal souls. The godly war, whose details we're glossing over for now, brought about various threats to these souls, and Pharasma used her power to ensure reality did not break. This brings up an important distinction. Pharasma does not control the River of Souls, nor is she 100% necessary to maintain its function. Death would still happen without her, and the dead would still move on. What's a little more up to question is exactly how everything else would work. During the process of creating the entire afterlife system, Pharasma brought many of the first mortal souls to the Boneyard to protect them from predation by horrible creatures that sought to consume them. When the godly conflict ended, Pharasma took a seat on top of the spire that held the Boneyard and beheld the congregation of souls before her. Many looked to her as their new protector, but she knew she couldn't keep them here. The river had to flow. So she began her greatest work, which continues to this day, judging the dead. She weighs their actions in life, accounts for any outstanding obligations a soul might have, and renders proper judgment. Once she has made a pronouncement, the soul is sent to the proper destination. This is not a punishment, at least not technically. It is simply sorting a soul to a final destination that most fits with how that soul itself now aligns. The fact that acting like a horrible person gets you sent to a horrible place, and acting like a nice person gets you sent somewhere nice, is just like calling to like. It is here on this throne that Pharasma has remained, building her court up all around her, creating the whole Boneyard. Now that story is the main myth that surrounds Pharasma, the first survivor of the world before, and judge of the souls in the world that comes after. She watches over all who live, and awaits the end of this cycle, when the universe itself ends once again and a new survivor takes her place. Until that happens, she watches, and that means she tends to play a part in other people's stories rather than having any more of her own. She has witnessed the entire history of the universe and only taken action for the greatest of dangers, like the imprisoning of Rovagug. Worshippers of gods who died often look to her for confirmation that their patron is truly gone. For example, while she has said nothing about how Arodin died, she did confirm his soul had been judged and passed on. Otherwise, Pharasma maintains neutrality in the affairs of other gods. That neutrality is incredibly important to her purpose. I mentioned before that Pharasma's judgment of souls is not about condemning or condoning anyone's actions. It's an accounting of the soul's life so they can be properly sorted into the afterlife most aligned with them. Going to hell is not a punishment for your actions in life. It is the place that most fits how you acted. Of course, the place where we send all the legalistic assholes that abuse their positions of power while acting like sycophants to anyone stronger than them sucks. It's filled with people exactly like I just described. If I was the kind of person to insert scenes from other media in my videos, the dead dove do not eat scene would go here. But I'm not, so instead you get a meta description of a meme instead. Darmok and Jalad at Tanagra and all that. Now, it seems like I repeated myself there, but I did this to underscore a couple points. Pharasma sees the worst the universe has to offer and judges it impartially. Souls that will go on to become tyrannical devils and slaughter-hungry demons are given the same consideration and neutrality as righteous champions and freedom fighters. Judgment without, judgment. And Pharasma's neutrality is why she stays out of most other people's stories. She doesn't want to influence their fate. She knows what it's supposed to be, and if she's supposed to influence it, then she already knows what to do, and most of the time it's nothing. I tell you all this to really emphasize the point that's coming next. Pharasma hates Urgathoa. Urgathoa is the original undead, the first being in the universe to see the cycle of souls and intentionally swim against the current, clawing her way back from the grave. This paved the way for more souls to follow in her footsteps. This is bad, because undeath runs completely counter to the River of Souls. It's forcing water to flow uphill, and bringing a lot of things from downstream with it that aren't supposed to be here. Undead, in all their forms, are damaging to the cycle of souls, and are one of Pharasma's two hated foes. The other is the daemons of Abaddon, nihilistic outsiders that seek the destruction of all life through the predation of souls. Daemons are naturally formed from their plane itself, and Pharasma can never truly eradicate them without just destroying that plane. But she does not tolerate them and works to keep their actions and numbers in check as much as she can while maintaining neutrality. It is, perhaps, the only aspect of her job where she has ever so slightly nudged the scale just a little bitty bit. Which is honestly why it's no wonder that Urgathoa hangs out in Abaddon. Birds of a feather commit soul crimes together. But while she only has two enemies and has very few what you might call close allies, she has a lot of connections all around the world, as Pharasma is as close to a universally worshipped deity as you can possibly get. For example, in Tian Sha, she is connected to Tsukio, the Prince of the Moon, who was murdered and returned to life a changed person. As the Arbiter of the Dead, Pharasma also has jurisdiction over those that return to life. And one of the most common stories from any mythology that involves the underworld are tales of someone returning to life. Although interestingly, there aren't many stories of rescuing someone from the underworld. This is because, as the goddess of fate, Pharasma is inherently aware of which souls are going to return to life, and which are ready for final judgment. When a soul passes into the boneyard, judgment isn't immediate. In the time between their death and this judgment, magic can return the soul to the body, which returns the person to life. You might think this is something Pharasma would be against, since it's returning a soul to life after it's passed on, but that's not the case. Undeath specifically subverts the flow of the River of Souls, whereas resurrection is more like a fork in the river that eventually winds around to rejoin the main flow. Or like a metaphor that starts out fine, gets kind of stretched in the middle, but eventually you kind of work through it enough to make everything snap back into place. However you want to explain it, the ultimate point is that Pharasma knows when a soul will come back to life, and as such, will not stop it from leaving the boneyard when that is going to happen. Reversing that, no matter how insistent a soul is that their friends are totally going to get around to that resurrection any day now, when Pharasma says your time has come, you are getting judged. Souls who receive this final judgment are fundamentally changed, becoming incompatible with their old forms. Many are transformed into some kind of resident of their destination plane, usually the lowest rung of that ladder, though that can vary with powerful or notable individuals. Hypothetically, powerful reality warping magic backed by an incredibly potent deity might possibly be able to also bring back someone from the ultimate judgment. Such circumstances would be extraordinary. The kind of thing that, as far as we know, has never happened and may never happen. Feel free to comment down below with a situation you've heard about from Pathfinder canon so I can explain how I totally knew about that one and have a well thought out rebuttal for how it totally does not count. To slightly cover myself here, souls are complex things, and it is possible for a portion or echo of a soul to return in some form, like a weird ghost or arcane invocation of Akashic legacy. And whatever creature they become after being judged can still travel the planes and return to the universe if circumstances are correct. If Uncle Dan dies and gets turned into an angel, Angel Uncle Dan can still come down to Earth. It'll just be Angel Uncle Dan and not Ghost Uncle Dan. He won't be able to return to life. Now, we've wandered far from mythology and story, but like I said, Pharasma herself doesn't have many stories. She's been around longer than anyone, more of an institution in the multiverse than a singular being. She has been for so long that none can imagine things without her. Pharasma is. Her true story is the universe before, the one she lived beyond. All of our lives are simply her epilogue. And when the day comes that the Lady of Graves finally passes on, that book will close for good, unless she survives a second time. Description. Pharasma is depicted as a tall, serious woman with ashen skin and white, untamed hair. Her clothing is dark-colored, either black or deep blue, sometimes with red accents. Usually it looks like a robe befitting the position of a judge. She is often shown with an hourglass filled with red sand. Pharasma's depictions are very consistent because while few interact with her directly, everyone meets her at some point. Instead of changing Pharasma, many cultures and ancestries across Golarion will have their own sort of deity of the dead who works for them, within Pharasma's systems to tend to the soul of their specific people. These other cultures are often attended by specific kinds of psychopomps. Pharasma's servants who deal with ushering the dead from their place in the material universe and the ethereal plane off to the boneyard for proper judgment and sorting. This consistent amount of middlemen is why Pharasma doesn't have many differences across cultures. But while she isn't depicted very differently, she does have a few other hats that she wears, and worshippers or locations focused more on these aspects will sometimes depict her slightly differently. The most common is showing her as a midwife, ready to help bring new life into the world. Souls are birthed first in Creation's Forge before entering the universe, and Pharasma's river carries them along that part of the journey too. She shepherds them to this point of beginning, where they will enter the world and weave themselves into the tapestry of fate. Before the Age of Lost Omens, she was also depicted as a prophet, but in recent times this has shifted, depicting a woman driven mad by her unreadable visions. This fate actually befell a lot of her worshippers when prophecy broke, though Pharasma herself has weathered this storm without any obvious change. In places where her faith is more concerned with combating the undead, she might be depicted as an avenging reaper, whose knife cuts down the risen and sends them to a true final rest. Her weapon is perhaps the most unusual thing here, as we often associate death with the scythe, come to reap lives like wheat in a field. But no, that imagery is reserved for more malicious gods. Pharasma is multifaceted, and the knife better works to cover all her various aspects. Plus, I think a man named Bill Dorr is currently using it still. I'm sure he'll give it back eventually. The final thing to touch on with Pharasma is her holy symbol, the spiral. Circling outward from the center, the spiral is a frequent sight at graveyards and mausoleums, to invoke Pharasma's protection for the dead. It represents both the long journey a soul undergoes throughout life, and the meandering road prophecy can take before reaching its end. The spiral is just more common in art, since it's a lot easier to draw, and you can invoke a blessing from Pharasma just by sketching one in the dirt. Now, one final thing about Pharasma that might seem a little odd. Why does she look like a human? She's older than time, while humans are relatively recent on a universal scale, so why does she look like them? The answer is deceptively simple, and it's not some vast conspiracy about the recreation of an extinct species from another universe or the weave of fate bending towards humanity. Rather, it's just reversing the question. Pharasma doesn't look human. Humans look like Pharasma. It's that simple. That's all cleared up. Let's move on to our next topic. Divine Realm. Talking about Pharasma's Divine Realm is tricky because it's very broad. Pharasma's domain is the Boneyard, as in the entire plane, where every dead soul goes for judgment. Going over the whole place would be a video in its own right, I said that a lot this video, and while Pharasma maintains authority over the entire place, there are locations that fall under the purview of other gods that don't really have anything to do with Pharasma, beyond kinda just living in the same spot, and I guess everyone kinda dealing with look, connection with Pharasma is a loose term, here's all I'm saying. Many psychopomp ushers have their own small domains scattered across the tombs, while powerful gods like Echekek and Grotus also make their home among the Boneyard. Kinda. Grotus mostly hangs above like a menacing moon who draws ever closer as the universe nears its final doom, while Echekek lives in the tunnel network that pervades the spire atop which the Boneyard rests. But it still counts. I've actually talked about the Boneyard before in my video covering the plains, so we're not going to go ahead and look at the whole thing again. Instead, let's take a closer look at a specific place in the Boneyard. Pharasma's Palace is a massive structure constructed of glowing white marble with onyx floors, the architecture aesthetic decidedly gothic. It stands out a lot from the rest of the Boneyard, which tends more towards the dark and spooky. But Pharasma watches over births too, and you want something bright and cheerful to welcome a child into the world. While it is Pharasma's home, it's also where her throne is located and where she sees petitioning souls for judgment. So yes, death does work from home. Most of her time is spent hearing the complicated cases that can arise from the complex mix of actions, motivations, and emotions that is inherent to the mortal condition. I said earlier that Pharasma judges every soul, and she technically does, but some of them are more rubber-stamped than others. It's not that those souls are less worthy of her personal attention, it's just that sometimes things aren't really that complicated. A good-hearted freedom fighter dedicated to a god in Elysium who lives their life entirely in line with that god's philosophy is bound for their realm. We don't need a complicated review of the whole life to understand that. The person's soul resonates strongly with that realm. All they need is a ride and a stamp of approval, and Pharasma is dealing with souls from across the entire universe, so anyone we can fast-track through is going to be a benefit because we have a lot of backlog to get through. And the reason for that is that some souls are more complex. Sincere deathbed conversions and dramatic changes of heart before heroic sacrifices do count for a lot. If half your soul is bound for heaven and the other half is condemned to hell, you don't get a house in the middle ground. You get a long litigation process where your actions and life are picked over with a fine-tooth comb to determine where exactly you belong. And no, Axis is not the halfway point between them. Please stop suggesting that. Neutral is not just an average of good and evil. I will fight you out back at the Boneyard Denny's about this. Moving on, you can also find souls of those who died under mysterious or unclear circumstances who petition the goddess for a chance to settle their unfinished business. Some are allowed back into the land of the living to pass on cryptic messages to their next of kin, push books off shelves for intrepid detectives to find, or help your nephew in a red shirt find your stash of Confederate gold before the bumbling brother of the local sheriff. Once their situation is resolved, they are returned to the Boneyard for proper judgment. Such individuals usually have a psychopomp working alongside them, both to help make the journey and to make sure no shenanigans occur. The rest of the souls residing here are Pharasma's most devoted worshippers, who remain in the Boneyard after their judgment. This is a valid place to end up after all. Some are also devoted worshippers of Atropos, Pharasma's daughter and the Judge of Judges. She is the second highest authority in the Boneyard, and only her mother sits above her. In fact, many say that Pharasma is basically teaching her daughter how to become the next Pharasma when her time eventually comes. The rest of the Boneyard we'll save for later. Like I said, it deserves its own video, it's a very big and complex place. Let's move on to talking about the actual worship of Pharasma with beliefs, philosophies, and aphorisms. Pharasma might as well be the universal definition of neutrality. She has to be. To allow her personal feelings to affect the judgment of a soul would betray her very essence of who she is. You could even say that peace between the divine realms relies on Pharasma's neutrality. Every other god can trust she will handle their worshippers fairly, even the divinities she despises like Urgathoa or the Apocalypse Riders of Abaddon. Can you imagine the damage that would happen if a god on the more extreme end of the spectrum were to be convinced Pharasma was biased against them? The Fiendish would feel cheated, the Celestial full of righteous indignation, and interplanar war would follow, and the cycles of life and death would be on the line. It could be the very thing that ends the universe. This aspect both does and does not transfer down to her followers. It can be said that people are only equal at 2 times in their life, the moment they are born and the moment they die. Pharasma's worshippers are there at both times, midwives and undertakers, ready to bring you into this world and take you away. And again, like their goddess, they are neutral actors here. It doesn't matter if they are born of a monster or died with their name cursed across the land. They are still entitled to the gift of life and the dignity of a proper rest, and that is how most people will interact with Pharasma's church. It's kind of easy to forget, since we experience this world through the lens of adventurers who seek out dangerous situations and live where things are likely to happen, but most people don't see a lot of zombies or extraplanar creatures throughout their lifetime. Even somewhere like Cheliax, where devils are far more common, the most they're likely to see is an imp out running an errand. The average person's concerns are a lot more mundane, which makes the big events a lot more impactful. The birth of a child and death of a loved one are going to stand out all the more. This heavily influences how people across the world worship Pharasma. Like, think about it. Iomedae is a popular goddess, sure, she's a pretty nice one. But if you're not a righteous crusader who's running out trying to defend the weak and stop injustices, how often are you really going to ever interact with Iomedae? Maybe if one of her followers comes around or like a crusade rolls into your neck of the woods, but most of the time she's not a relevant factor in your life. She's a famous person, you know somebody who knows a cousin who met one time or something like that. Pharasma though, you're born. You're gonna die. You have to interact with Pharasma's worshippers at least 2 points in your life, and probably more, because people around you are gonna die, and people around you are gonna be born. Pharasma is often worshipped as a tripatriate goddess, meaning she has 3 aspects or personas that are revered in equal measure, each worshipped slightly differently, befitting their specific role. These 3 aspects are birth, death, and prophecy, and at large cathedrals there will be a follower specializing in each aspect, making up the leadership. The more layman worshippers are expected to have a broad skill set, able to shift roles as necessary, acting as midwives one day, prophetic interpreters the next, and exercising undertakers on the weekends, clearing out local abandoned graveyards. But most will feel a calling towards one of these 3 aspects, and that will influence how they engage in their worship. So let's begin with the first time you'll meet them. Those who focus on Pharasma as the goddess of birth act as midwives and healers, bringing children into the world and helping the new parents with any healing they might need from the resulting complications. Birth is a miracle, but it's also a painful and draining miracle, with a lot that can go wrong. Even more so in a world like Golarion, where a pair of human parents are in for a surprise when their child comes out with some scales and horns because one of their grandfathers did a favor for a dragon who blessed the family line. While that can be nice long term, the baby right now is trying to squeeze through a birth canal not built for horns, and no one is having a good time. And, children don't exactly come out nice and clean. The birthing process still has a lot of steps even after the pushing is finished. A good, experienced healer in this regard is always going to be welcome. Doubly so for one that can also offer the child a blessing and heal any trauma that might have resulted from complications. I know Golarion is much less technological than our world, but imagine how much easier it must be for a simple birth to just end with a cure wounds and a day of bed rest before you're honestly pretty well recovered, as opposed to weeks of needing to regain your strength while taking painkillers because you just popped a baby out. Food for thought. Pharasma's followers are a lot less involved in the rest of the person's life, though they're not heartless. Her clerics and other devoted divine casters can still heal people and have no problem doing so. There is a sense of certainty that comes from worshipping the goddess of fate who knows when someone is ready to meet their final end. Every successful healing cast from your goddess has the tacit approval to help the person get better. It tends to be more incidental compared to their more specific duties though, rather than a calling many aspire to. The more proactive Pharasmans often deal with her opposite, though not opposing aspect, death. I mentioned that Pharasma's neutrality doesn't necessarily trickle down to her followers, and it's this part that I was talking about when I said that. Pharasma despises the undead, the daemons, any other kind of soul predators, and all of their associated followers. And it's those followers who we're talking about now. The goddess will judge the necromancer and the cultist fairly once their time has come, but her worshippers are free to judge their kneecaps far more harshly between now and their final reckoning. Not that Pharasma encourages that kind of harsh punishment, mind you, she just doesn't discourage it. Okay, that's a bit of an exaggeration. Most Pharasmans who worship her as the goddess of death aren't overly harsh on mortals, mostly because their greatest zeal is reserved for the undead. They can and will fight other extraplanar threats when they show up, but most of those tend to stick to the outer planes, and are thus more often dealt with by psychopomps. The undead, by contrast, more often appear in the material universe, and are more easily taken out by mortals. And as such, it falls to the mortal followers to deal with them. Additionally, extraplanar creatures rarely have a good and consistent way to get to the material plane, needing rituals and powerful summoners to bring them in. The undead, though, can manifest through circumstance. Mass burial plots left forgotten see the resentful slain rising to seek vengeance. Unhallowed cemeteries with untended graves see the ghosts of the forgotten wailing in the night to share their pain. Powerful magic can echo across time and space in the wake of a greater undead to give rise to lesser spawn thousands of years after the master has been forgotten. The fight against the unquiet dead is an eternal one, and Pharasma's faithful are the front lines of that fight. They tend to be much more dour and stoic, doing their duty to honor their lady and striking down any undead they may find with righteous zeal. There's not a whole lot of negotiating of, oh, I was made into undead by accident, and I'm actually very good, and I'm a nice vampire, and I only drink the blood of, bears and wolves and stuff. If you rose to undeath by accident and you have some important duty left to fulfill, the Pharasman Church will very occasionally bend and help you fulfill that duty, but then you are dying. You will move on to your final rest. There is no sticking around after that. They will help you fulfill a last request, but it is a last request. The final group of the three are those connected to Pharasma's domain of prophecy, and they face a much more esoteric conflict. Aroden's death shattered prophecy and ushered in the Age of Lost Omens. How is Pharasma's domain over prophecy even relevant anymore? There isn't any. Well, see, here's the thing about prophecy breaking. It doesn't stop there from being prophets. Seers, oracles, diviners, whatever you want to call them, people who could peer into the tapestry of fate and determine the future have been around for a long time. When prophecy broke, so did most of them. Many were driven mad as the previously clear visions they had became strange, contradictory, and difficult to parse. Prophecy has always had some level of uncertainty to it, things could be read in different ways to impart different meanings to visions. But now it's completely unpredictable and nearly impossible to parse. All those who were alive at the time of Aroden's death, and many who are born now, are afflicted with these visions in a way that leaves them mad and unable to function. Pharasma's worshippers have shifted around these events in two ways. Firstly, since they feel like all prophecy ultimately stems from their patron, they take in and care for those driven mad by their visions, attempting to help them cope as best they can. Not that they need to do this for everyone that claims to be able to foretell the future, prophecy is a much more specific branch of that, laying out events that are destined to happen. Smaller divinations, like those performed with a hero deck, are still affected by being less reliable, but they aren't harmed the same way, since they touch on a more generalized direction of events. Think of it like this. Imagine your goal is to reach a city. You don't know where it is or how to get there. A hero reading is like someone that's seen the city on a map and knows it's about 5 hours south of you, telling you to take the road headed south for at least 5 hours and look for signs along the way. You'll probably end up in that city, but might get lost if construction has a main road closed off or the highway diverts around it for some reason and you miss the proper exit. Prophecy is instead up-to-the-minute GPS coordinate directions to your destination, accounting for all construction as well as known traffic patterns to assure you never get stuck in rush hour. Only now, the Aerospace Reliable Operations Direct Express navigation system is down and never coming back. Hope you kept one of those old maps in your glove box. In keeping with this metaphor, some people are still hooked up to this system and receiving constant update notifications telling them the system is down and out of date and please update your iOS. And it occasionally makes an annoying pinging sound that you can't really time or predict or turn off or even tell where it's coming from, and you were really needing to get some sleep that night but the pinging just kept happening and God, I have work tomorrow, what are you doing? You can see why some people are driven mad by this. So some of Pharasma's churches have places set aside for people afflicted with this condition to rest, recover, and live with their condition. Very nice of them. The other half of this group are scholars that study old prophecies for clues. While it is broken now, prophecy was once accurate and can offer information to deal with issues arising in modern day. A foretelling from 3730 that in 1,000 years the Ancient One shall rise from a long-dead torpor to shatter seals and usher in a new brood of the rough beast may no longer be destined to happen, but it can't hurt to send a maintenance crew around to his resting place to give it a once-over, maybe put together some adventurers to nip this whole thing in the bud a little early if it's still gonna happen. Information and insight can still be hidden in these old tomes, if you can piece together the broken puzzle. But for all her devoted followers, the last rites of a body are important and quite sacred. It is the final act someone should receive in life, the closing pages of their story, and should always be treated with respect. Not just because desecrated bodies are more likely to rise as an undead, but also because their soul is gone, off to the boneyard for judgment by a higher authority than themselves. Even if this was the foulest person you could be, someone who is better off dead and gone, they were still a soul, and that soul deserves the same respect that is shown to all of them. That person's life will be judged in time. The body is cold, let it rest in peace, like all the others. Like with Gorm and many other deities, a lot of this can easily be summed up in common aphorism used by the layperson and the faithful alike. So let's start with a fun one. Not this year, not yet. This is a simple prayer uttered by those that are asking for more time to accomplish what they feel they need to do. Their death might come eventually, but they would very much like that to be farther down the road. However, it's important to keep in mind this next saying when uttering the prayer. Pharasma's sands keep running. Just like the clocks in San Dimas, Pharasma never hits the pause button. Time keeps moving forward, and you can only have so much of it. This actually has something of a dual meaning. It can be both used to hurry someone along who is taking a while to get moving, but also to remind the impatient that even if they have a long wait, it will eventually come to an end. I feel like your reception to either one of them depends a lot on what stage of life a person is at, as does this next one actually. All who live must face her judgment. This is a reminder that even if you otherwise answer to no one, you have to answer to Pharasma. When it all comes to an end, how will the Lady of Graves look upon your actions? Can you stand in judgment proud of what you've done? Granted, this mostly works on people who are already on the fence about their actions and willing to reflect and change, but some people need that kind of motivation, the fear of being judged by someone who will know what they did in the dark, when there were none else to know, because Pharasma will know. And that actually pairs nicely with our last saying, the lady shall keep it. This is an oath of secrecy, vowing that they will only ever speak of this again to Pharasma herself, essentially taking the secret to the grave. Given that it specifically invokes her, this kind of oath is very powerful, because if you do break it, you have to answer to Pharasma eventually, so you better have a really good reason. Now, in the Gorum video, I titled the next section, Holy Text, Art, and Worship. However, I feel like I've already gone over the worship part pretty well in this video, and I don't want to repeat that too much, so instead we'll be talking about art, holidays, and holy text. Honestly, probably what I should have titled this section in the last video. Hindsight is 2020, and what's Gorum gonna do about it? He's dead and judged. Anyway, as a fairly universal goddess, Pharasma's worship can be seen all across the world. Her depictions tend to be pretty consistent like we've gone over earlier, only occasionally taking on features from local human populations, but otherwise looking recognizably her. Variance more often comes in the form of funeral rites for the deceased. For example, burial is more common in the Inner Sea, while cremation is more common in Tian Sha. This difference also leads to a difference in places of worship. People in Tian Sha usually have a familial shrine dedicated to Pharasma, where things like urns of ashes can be kept, while the Inner Sea region built larger dedicated temples around boneyards. Small settlements will be more austere, with one priest and a few acolytes under them taking care of the local funerary business, while larger locations will have grand cathedrals with soaring spires and a priest specifically dedicated to each of Pharasma's divine purviews. Pharasma's spiral is seen in nearly all these places, as well as around anywhere meant to inter the dead. Whippoorwills also show up fairly often, as they are Pharasma's sacred animal. Most cultures consider them psychopomps, guides that take the souls of the dead to their rest, and many of Pharasma's capital P psychopomps do take the form of whippoorwills when they must enter the physical universe, but remain discreet. That's on a whole pretty rare, since most of them can accomplish their job while remaining in the ethereal, but you never really know. Black roses are another common symbol associated with Pharasma, and I'm not sure if there's a deeper meaning to this one beyond just goth aesthetic. But I'm a person of refined taste, so I'm not going to argue with any goth ladies. I know what they're about. Pharasma's holy text is a book called The Bones Land in a Spiral, and it has actually changed a bit over time. The first part of the text, which seems to be the original extent of the book, contains writings from an ancient prophet, whose predictions are vague and highly open to interpretation. Scholars debate what each one means, and it's entirely possible that they were written that way intentionally, to act as a teaching tool for future diviners to hone their understanding of visions. Later editions expand the information available, providing advice on safe childbirthing, proper rites for burial, and ways to prepare a body to prevent the creation of undead from the remains. It's unclear exactly when these parts of the text were added, though I can't believe it's as recent as Eridan's death. If I had to guess, I'd say that there were originally other books used for these topics, while The Bones was simply a collection of a single prophet's writing that were popular among the faithful. As this single text became more widespread, other information was folded in to make it more as a general guide to Pharasman priests. And thus we end up where we are today. Kind of a long meandering path, almost like a bit of a spiral if you think about it. Now for holidays, Pharasma has two major ones. The third month of the calendar, at least for the Inner Sea, is Pharast, in honor of Pharasma. On the 5th day of this month, the Day of Bones is held, where the recently dead are given an honored procession through the streets before being entombed in the catacombs of a local church of Pharasma. This is significant because the church catacombs are specifically usually reserved for the bodies of those who have done a great service to the Lady of Graves. The exact significance of this isn't entirely clear, but maybe it's meant to emphasize the equality of death, bringing the common people to Pharasma. I don't know, I'm just making educated guesses here. The second holiday doesn't have a set date. The Procession of Unforgotten Souls is a nightly festival held in the weeks leading up to the local harvest festival. Priests wear thin black robes and carry lit candles in a procession towards a nearby large body of water, like a lake or placid river, or even a big pool if you don't have another suitable body of water. They utter prayers to Pharasma to delay her judgment for another year and allow them long life and prosperity. The priests will walk through the water, submerging and allowing their candles to go out. Once they reach the opposite side of this body of water, the candles are relit, showing the festival clothes now visible under the wet, transparent robes. Honestly, while that's a very cool ritual, since it happens during the harvest time, all I can think of is how frickin' cold you must be at the end of that. Like, super chilly. Oh, like the chill of the grave. I get it now, I get it. Conclusion. And thus we come to an end of our coverage for the Lady of Graves. Pharasma is a fundamental goddess, one of the literal pillars of the universe. I legitimately feel like if she was to ever perish herself, it would be a sign the universe was about to come to an end. In the lead up to Gorm's demise, a series of documents called the God's Reign Prophecies were reviewed by a psychopomp named Yavali. The first one was a foretelling of the death of Pharasma herself, a horrifying thing to read for one of her worshippers for sure. While it would not come to pass, it paints a grim picture of a world without the Lady. The River of Souls runs wild and the outer planes are plunged into chaos as the dead are no longer sent to the planes they align with. The undead revel, resurrections slowly fail, and the moon falls ever closer to the boneyard, while the psychopomps look on in horror. And while that's bad, I feel like some version of this must one day come to pass. Pharasma is the survivor of the previous universe. She is older than old, and has spent her entire existence working. Part of me wonders if she's tired, ready to be done with it all, to put her universe fully to bed and make way for the new world. Perhaps when her daughter is ready, she will retire fully, retreating into her palace and passing quietly. Until then, she sits and she judges. Death is something we all have in common, and what comes after is a universal mystery. Pharasma provides something that anyone who lost a loved one needs, the knowledge that there is somebody looking out for them. That in the end, when all is said and done, we can stand before a being that has seen the totality of our lives and who says, "You are done. You may rest. Go in peace." It's comforting in a way, and so is Pharasma. Thank you very much for watching, Pathfinders. I am happy to be back from our trip to space, and I hope to provide more videos in the weeks to come. Check out the socials and the Patreon in the meantime, enjoy all that sweet spooky candy I know you raked in, and until next time, explore, report, and cooperate.